time. And so this is what it looks like to actually test that stuff. There's literally specialty equipment just to torture phones with water and make sure they can survive. So lots of companies have these things, but it was cool to see it in person. So the lowest level of this test is basically a drip ceiling to simulate rain and splashing. So there's no real water pressure here, but a pass is good for IPX4 on this test. But then to simulate some water pressure, they have these jets that rotate around the device and spray it with water from all angles, into the speakers, into the earpiece, into the ports, everything. And if it's able to pass this test, that's good for IPX5. It seems so simple, but it's also pretty cool to see. I've never actually watched this happen. To turn it up to 11, they just put the phone on one end and stick basically a literal fire hose on the other end and just blast the phone with high pressure water. Kind of looks insane, but if we want our modern smartphones to be able to get splashed from any angle many times over its lifetime and survive, then it has to survive this, and then it earns its IPX6 rating. But then finally, for IPX7 and IPX8, that's full submersion, so they have some lockable sealed tanks. But some of you may already know that IPX8 is supposed to be under deep water for a long time, so they actually have this pressurized tank where they can turn up the pressure inside to simulate different water depths and leave phones in there as long as they want. So now, ideally today, if you drop your phone in the toilet or spill water on it or drop it in a lake, whatever, for as long as it's down there, it should survive. Which, again, we kind of take it for granted, but that's all the seals and the gaskets and all the adhesives and things that go into getting it to pass those tests are what get it to pass the real world tests. Now, there is an entire separate type of testing that you might have already seen on YouTube that is drop testing. And it turns out Apple has been doing their own internal drop testing for years now. So it turns out in the same building, Apple set up this full-on industrial robot by Epson that they've programmed to be a drop test robot. And then they've set it up in front of these ultra bright lights and super high-speed phantom cameras pointed at the exact spot on the ground where the phone will land. So the idea here is they can program the robot to pick up the phone and drop it onto any surface. And then they can have it repeat that exact motion and that exact same drop on the exact same angle over and over again, but with different surfaces, and they can A/B test them and take a look at exactly what happens. And then those of you who are camera nerds, you already know these phantom cameras are pretty serious. I don't remember the exact frame rate they told me they were shooting at, but it's pretty incredible. You can actually see the titanium on this iPhone 15 Pro wobble on its first impact with the ground. And its second impact too. So yeah, they had all kinds of different materials to do drop tests, from granite countertops to marble to corkboard and wood, etc. They even had this massive block of asphalt just sitting there, just waiting to see how the iPhone reacts to being dropped in the streets, you know? But this is a fascinating setup. Now, of course, the fact is most phones still just break immediately when you drop them on the ground. So I kind of wonder how much of this data is actually getting translated into real changes of phone design, but it's still cool that I got to see all this stuff. And then the hardest one to capture, for me anyway, is the shaking tests. Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. Shaking tests. Apple has rooms full of machines that are literally trays of devices strapped to a surface that's being shaken thousands of times at a specific frequency. It's actually kind of hard to record because if my shutter speed is at the right number, it doesn't even really look like anything's moving, kind of like how car wheels don't look like they're spinning if you have the right camera settings. But I did get a few clips where like I put my hand on it and you can see it's moving a lot. They're using this machine to try to simulate years of wear and tear out in the real world. Apparently, they can program in the frequency of a certain motorcycle engine or car engine or subway car or whatever constant vibration that they just want to check up on to make sure everything holds up to exposure to it over a very long time. But I really think the most fascinating thing about all this testing is they are trying, before the phone even comes out, they're trying to simulate years of wear and tear in the real world with real customers in a small room under the basement of Apple Park with like the machines that they've designed. It's a fascinating connection they've got to make. And I spoke to John Turnus, who's the head of hardware engineering at Apple, about this process, and he mentioned apparently they go through sometimes 10,000 iPhones prototypes before they actually ship a final phone with all this durability testing.